Do you like your friends? I hope you do. I know personally, I like my friends kind of a little bit. So today, I actually wanted to tell you the story about how I met one of my bestestest friends in the entire world. It was the beginning of my junior year of college, and at the time, I didn't have a lot of Christian friends. I also didn't have a ton of Asian friends, and if you didn't know, I am Asian. I have been my whole life, and I wanted to have more friends who were Christian and Asian that I personally could relate to, and so I started praying. I prayed to God that He would provide more Christian friends into my life and more Asian friends. And so that fall, at the church that I was working at, we had a young adults fall retreat thing, and my sister and I decided to go, and that was super fun, and I was really excited to go. I mean, this is just camp but for adults. And when I got there, I met this guy named Sam. This is us now. But Sam was literally the coolest person ever. He and I clicked super quickly, and he's actually now one of my best friends in the world. I love him so much. Shout out to Sam. I know you're watching this. Hi bro, I love you. But as we got to know each other, we learned that we both love to lead worship. We both played video games. We both love sports. He likes the Packers, so that kind of sucks. Hashtag School Vikings, but I'll let that one slide for now. But something that you might have also noticed about Sam is that not only do we have a lot in common, not only are we both Christians, but we're also both Asian. I did it, I found one. So here I am praying for more Christian friends and some more Asian friends, and then Sam. And so later that weekend, a bunch of us guys decided to go and play a game of football, like dudes do. So we got into our two teams, and Sam and I luckily were on the same team, and man, can I just tell you guys, we played one heck of a game of football. It was super fun. Somehow we managed to keep it a really close game. Sam was our quarterback, and that boy can throw some dots, that's all I'm saying. And there were a few that Sam threw up for me that somehow, I don't know, I've always been that fat Asian kid, but somehow I came down with it, and I was feeling like Justin Jefferson. It was awesome. Everyone on the team contributed. It was super fun. We ended up winning the game. It was super exciting. One of my personal favorite memories of sports. But the reason that I tell you this story is that the whole reason that we were able to win that game was because we worked really well as a team. And that's what this whole video is about, is unity. But before we get to that, really quick, if you haven't already, you should check out the other videos on this playlist. I'll link that right there. And maybe like and subscribe while you're at it. That'd be cool. Today, I want to start back at the beginning of creation. So God has just finished creating all of the things, including Adam. And life was perfect. For real, legit, actually perfect. Sin had not entered into the world yet, and God literally walked around the garden with Adam. Nothing could have been better at this point in life. But then God looked at Adam and said something interesting. It says in Genesis chapter 2, verse 18, "Then the Lord God said, 'It is not good for the man to be alone. I will make a helper who is just right for him.'" It's crazy to think that Adam had this perfect life. I mean, things were amazing, and God still looked at Adam in this perfect world and said, "It's not good for you to be alone." I think that this verse can actually teach us a lot about the value of community and companionship. I mean, God had literally made everything and it was perfect, but then when God was looking at Adam's life, He knew he needed another human being to be united with. And so God creates Eve, and she becomes Adam's wife. From the very beginning of time, God said humankind needed community. Our souls need to be in relationship with others because healthy relationships keep our souls healthy. There are a couple examples actually in King David's life that show us how healthy relationships kept David's soul healthy. And the first example of this is actually David's best friend, Jonathan. Their friendship was really unique because Jonathan was King Saul's son and the Prince of Israel. So actually Jonathan was in line to be the next king after Saul, not David. Saul was one of those guys who was constantly worried about what other people thought about him. He actually worried about it so much that he failed to follow God. And this caused several major problems for King Saul and the whole country of Israel. See, after David killed Goliath, Saul made David a commander in his army, and God blessed David, and he became super successful. And one day at a celebration after a successful battle, Saul heard some of the women saying how amazing that David was. And this made Saul like real jealous. And eventually that jealousy grew until Saul despised David so much that he actually tried to kill him. And while all of this was going on, David and Saul's son Jonathan had become besties for the resties. And this didn't stop Saul from wanting to kill David. I mean, he actually started making attempts to kill David, and eventually David got to a point where he knew that his only option was to run away. And so he turned to his best friend Jonathan and asked for help. You know, the son of the guy trying to murder him. And once Jonathan realized that his father was trying to kill his best friend, his heart was crushed. I mean, Jonathan knew that their friendship would be completely over because of King Saul. But look at some of the last words that Jonathan spoke to David. It says in 1 Samuel chapter 20, verses 42, it says, "Go in peace, for we have sworn friendship with each other in the name of the Lord, saying, the Lord is a witness between you and me, and between your descendants and my descendants forever." Jonathan didn't only just like say the right things, he actively helped David get away from his father too. And here's a quick question for all of us that we should ask ourselves. Are we the kind of friend that only talks, or are we the kind of friends that are out there and helping our friends in their time of need? Obviously, it's important to say the right things, but we also need to look out for our friends when they need it. David's friendship with Jonathan shows us that real friends look out for one another. Jonathan and David were united in their friendship, and Jonathan's decision to help David not only went against his father, but it also went against like the king, you know, like the guy. And if Saul had found out about this, he actually could have killed Jonathan for letting David go. Jonathan knew and was willing to accept this punishment because he valued his friendship with David more. And so really quick, think about your friends right now. Like hypothetically, if you knew that someone was gonna try to kill your friends, what would you do? I mean, more than likely, you would probably do your best to help them, right? I mean, I would hope that that would be the case. I hope that would be the case for me. But likely, none of us are gonna be faced with this scenario, probably. But like, what about like everyday life stuff? You know, are you willing to help your friends the way that Jonathan looked out for David? Are you willing to listen to your friends? Are you willing to help them out even when it's not convenient? Because that's what real unity of the soul looks like. David had another friend actually named Nathan, and Nathan was a prophet of the Lord. Several years after Jonathan helped David run away from King Saul, David became the king of Israel. And one evening, while David was on the roof of his palace, he saw a beautiful woman taking a bath. Now this woman, her name was Bathsheba. She was already married, but that didn't stop David from wanting her. I mean, after all, he was the king and he could pretty much do whatever he wanted. So he invited Bathsheba up to his palace, and then he, David, the so-called man after God's own heart, committed adultery with her. David tried to fix his mistake instead of going to God for help, and ultimately he ended up just making more bad decisions that just made everything worse. So really quick poll, has anyone ever made a mistake and then when you like try to cover it up, it just made things worse? I know I have 100% done that a million times, and that's exactly what we see happening here with David. And in the end, David essentially had Bathsheba's husband executed on the battlefield and then had it make it look like an accident. And after the husband was gone, David went and took Bathsheba as his own wife. You know, David, like the guy who's generally considered to be one of like the heroes of the Bible, and Jesus is actually a descendant of David. Here we have the story of how terrible David behaves while he's the king of God's people. And before we move on in the story, it's important that we stop and talk about mistakes, because like who here hasn't done something that they regret? And part of David's story is how God used him in spite of his mistakes. And I want you to hear this clearly. God can do the same thing with each of us. God actually ends up redeeming David's story. And the interesting thing is that God used a friend named Nathan to speak into David's life. It says in 1 Samuel chapter 2, verses 7 through 9, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel says. I anointed you king over Israel, and I delivered you from the hand of Saul. I gave your master's house to you and your master's wives into your arms. I gave you all of Israel and Judah, Judah. And if all of this had been too little, I would have given you even more. Why did you despise the word of the Lord by doing what is evil in his eyes?" When Nathan had learned about what David had done, he went to him and he actually called him out. He said, "Why did you despise the Lord by doing evil in his eyes?" See, Nathan knew David and he knew that what he was doing wasn't pleasing to God. Real friends have your back, and that also means that real friends recognize failure. You need friends in your life like Nathan, friends who will look out for you and encourage you to grow in your faith. Sometimes we need people to recognize our failures and encourage us by calling out our mistakes. And Paul actually writes about this in the New Testament and on the letter that he wrote to the church in Galatia. It says in Galatians chapter 6, verses 1 and 2, "Dear brothers and sisters, if another believer is overcome by some sin, you who are godly should gently and humbly help that person back onto the right path. And be careful not to fall into the same temptation yourself. Share each other's burdens, and in this way obey the law of Christ." This is what it means to have unity in your soul with each other. Even when you need to tell someone a harsh truth, you do it anyway because you care about them on a deep and soulful level. I mean, think about the words of this passage. Share each other's burdens and help that person. Our souls are meant to have community with others, and part of this community is challenging each other to be like Jesus in all areas of our life. Nathan was this kind of friend for David. He made some terrible decisions and thought he could fly under the radar, but Nathan came to him and called him out in love. Nathan told David something that we all need to hear, and that's that God has something better for you. We're all guilty of making bad decisions in the heat of the moment without thinking about the consequences. And sometimes we make selfish decisions that cause pain to other people. And so I want you to ask yourself right now, how can you be a Jonathan to those around you? We all want more friends like Jonathan, but how many of us are actually willing to become that kind of friend first? What would it take for you to become more selfless, a better listener, and more sacrificial in your friendships? Here's the next thing I want you to consider. How can you be a Nathan to your friends? We all tend to make a mess out of our lives, and God's grace is the only thing that can put it all back together. Don't be frustrated when a friend tells you the hard truths about life. That's a real friend who only wants the best for your soul.